Why don't we go to my parents' house for New Year's? Those words from my husband were the beginning of a chain of events that would unravel everything. My name is Susan. I'm a 35-year-old housewife. My husband, Ben, and I met at work, married, and after having our cherished daughter, Emily, I left my job. I only visited my in-laws for the first time when Emily was 6 years old. Hey, isn't dinner ready yet? My mother-in-law's voice called out. Almost done, Mother, I replied, my hands busy with the preparations. She sighed heavily. Ben, how can you stand having a wife who takes forever with everything? Yeah, other people's wives manage things much faster. But not Susan, Ben added. I stared at him, incredulous. Really? He was just lounging in front of the TV while I worked. Before I could voice my frustration, my mother-in-law's next orders came through. After breakfast, you need to clean up the yard, then the closet, and finally the storage outside. It was New Year's Day, supposed to be a time of relaxation and celebration. Instead, I found myself overwhelmed with chores and resentment, all while my husband did nothing to help. By the time I completed all the tasks my mother-in-law had given me, I was utterly exhausted. I sank into a chair in the living room, trying to catch my breath. Who said you could take a break? Get lunch ready now, my mother-in-law ordered without a hint of sympathy. I've been working all day, I protested. I just needed a moment to rest. A wife should be working like a servant, she snapped. You think you can just relax and eat for free? Get to work. What? My husband's family lives in the countryside where old traditions still linger. The outdated belief that a wife should serve her in-laws persists, but I never imagined it would mean working like a servant. Hey, can you give me a hand? I asked him, hoping for some support. Not a chance, he replied with a dismissive tone. At home, my husband does nothing, and here at my in-laws, he's been drinking all day. He hasn't lifted a finger since this morning. I'm going to the grocery store, I said, hoping to at least get some assistance. Yeah, go ahead, he said without looking up. Can you help me carry some things? I asked. Supermarkets out here are miles away, and while he's been drinking since morning, I don't have a driver's license. That meant I had no choice but to walk, a 30-minute trek each way. He scowled when I asked him to help with the groceries. No, I don't feel like it. His response was as cold as ever. Do you want me to throw mochi at you? I nearly said aloud, picturing the mess it would make on his face. But my husband just sat there, proudly holding his beer can. I just had a drink, he mumbled. And what's with the robotic speech? I asked. I'm drunk, he replied nonchalantly. So what? So I can't go. Right? You just don't want to go. Typical, I snapped, feeling frustrated. My mother-in-law's voice cut through from behind me. Is the meal ready yet? Oh great, now I'm going to face the wrath of the mochi. Finally, I trudged back after a grueling 60-minute walk, bags heavy in both hands. I felt dizzy and exhausted as I reached my in-law's house. I dropped the bags and slumped against the front door, letting out a weary sigh. Then I heard my mother-in-law's angry yell. Hurry up, you're as slow as your mother. I'm sorry, I heard my daughter say, her voice trembling. At that moment, despite my exhaustion, I felt a surge of energy. I leaped up and stormed into the kitchen, stepping over my husband who was still sprawled on the floor, groaning in response to the impact. What's going on here? I demanded. My mother-in-law and daughter turned to look at me. My daughter's face brightened with relief as tears welled up in her eyes. My mother-in-law remained seated, indifferent to the scene unfolding. What's going on here? I demanded, confronting my mother-in-law. She shot me a contemptuous look. My daughter was awkwardly holding the inner pot from the rice cooker. Why was she doing that? Emily, what are you doing? My daughter looked uncomfortable as she explained. Rayma told me to get ready because she was hungry. First, she asked me to cook rice. I washed the rice and... My mother-in-law interrupted with a sneer. Look at her, she can't even cook rice properly. What a useless granddaughter. She's just like her mother. I'm starting to wonder if she's really my son's child. My anger flared at her criticism of my daughter. She's only 6 years old. It's outrageous to expect her to handle this. She might be learning, but why can't you do it yourself? How can you treat your own granddaughter like this? My mother-in-law's face flushed bright red, her voice rising to a squeak. What are you saying? You want to make me do all the work? What a terrible woman you are. A wife is a servant, meant to work quietly, and the daughter of a servant is also a servant. A servant. Who do you think supports your living? You depend on my son's hard work. You owe respect to both him and me. Stop complaining and get to work, servant. With that, my mother-in-law stormed out of the kitchen. Her fierceness left me speechless. I was dumbfounded by her absurdity. As I stood there, I overheard her talking with my husband. Your wife is useless. She's no better than a servant. But once my daughter grows up, she'll be of some use. Just be patient. I know things are tough at home. If you want to come back, that's fine. Divorce is an option, but I need a servant. Why don't we live together? I'm tired of my current job too. Maybe it wouldn't be so bad to let her do the work while I relax in the countryside. What did my husband just say? I was stunned by his suggestion. Oh, that's a great idea, my mother-in-law agreed, leaving me completely dumbfounded. I clenched my fists in frustration, only to feel them enveloped by warm hands. Mom. It was my daughter. I looked down at her, and she gazed up at me with concern. I knelt down to her level and spoke softly. Hey, Emily. What is it, Mommy? Do you like Daddy? She hesitated, unable to give a quick answer. How could she? My husband is distant and indifferent. When he's home, he rarely interacts with her. He's either glued to the TV or his phone. On weekends, he's out drinking and comes home late. Since COVID, his drinking has become more frequent, and hangovers are a regular occurrence. On holidays, he either stays home doing nothing or goes out with friends. Family outings are rare. This trip to the in-laws is the first one we've had in years. I doubt he even knows what grade Emily is in or what she likes and dislikes. He's uninterested in her future, probably doesn't even realize she'll be starting elementary school next year. How could she say she loves her father? Of course, she couldn't. I asked again, do you like your grandmother? No. The answer came immediately. I couldn't help but laugh quietly. Well, no wonder, given how she yells at you, I thought. But then Emily said something that took me by surprise. Because she bullies you, Mom. It's New Year's Day, and you haven't had a moment to relax. She's always ordering you around. Grandma is so cruel. Wow, kids really do notice everything. It's clear Emily can see how much I'm being bossed around. With a gentle smile, I asked her the crucial question, Emily, would you like to live with your grandmother? She shook her head firmly. And what about your father? No. Her responses were clear and immediate, helping me make my decision for the next day. The following morning, I took Emily out. By the time we returned to my in-laws' house, it was already dark. As soon as we walked in, my mother-in-law and husband greeted us with annoyance. You're finally back. Where have you been? They demanded. Just taking care of some things, I replied, sidestepping the question. My mother-in-law, in her usual commanding tone, said, Young wives these days. I'm starving. Where's my food and tea, servant? I silently served them both tea. When my husband reached for his cup, I swiftly pulled it away, making sure he wouldn't get it before his mother. What? What the hell? My husband's shock was evident. Without a word, I poured the tea over his head. Whoa, what are you doing? He shouted. Don't worry, it's already cooled down. That's not the point. What the hell? Stop it. I avoided his attempts to reach for me and set the cup down firmly. What on earth are you doing? You're supposed to be a servant. My mother-in-law's face was twisted in rage. Shut up. I am not your servant. I shot back, my anger boiling over. My mother-in-law tried to stand up and confront me, but I cut her off. Let me make this clear. A son's wife is not a servant. I'm not here to serve you, I declared firmly. She was too stunned to respond, her mouth opening and closing in shock. I moved in closer, not caring about the distance between us. Ah, she screamed in surprise. I leaned in, narrowing the space between us to just 10 centimeters. Listen carefully. No system in the world allows you to treat a wife like a servant. I will protect my family, but I will not be your personal maid. But I'm your husband's mother. I'm family too. You should protect me and follow my orders. Are you out of your mind? If I were truly a servant, I wouldn't be family. How can you consider yourself family when all you do is issue commands? I spoke calmly but firmly, watching as my mother-in-law's face shifted from a pale blue to a bright, furious red. How dare you speak to me like that? My mother-in-law roared. You were speaking to me the same way. Why shouldn't I respond in kind? I shot back. I am your mother-in-law. Stop saying nonsense. I had been holding back for too long. But now my patience had reached its limit. The constant disrespect from my mother-in-law and husband finally shattered my restraint. And what of it? Are you treating your grandchild like a servant? Are you really treating her like that? Enough with your nonsense. I moved in closer and her face once again turned a sickly shade of blue. It was like watching a traffic light change colors. How weak she looked, so bossy yet crumbling under a little resistance. I couldn't help but scoff as I turned away. My mother-in-law trembled slightly, still pale and visibly shaken. I focused my attention on my husband. And you? Yes, he replied, sounding sheepish. It was infuriating how he answered so meekly. I glared at him. What have you been doing while our daughter and I were being treated like servants? I was on my phone and drinking beer. Drinking beer while your daughter and wife are treated like this? Must be a great life you're living. I'm sorry. Just apologizing isn't enough, I shouted, my anger making my voice almost unrecognizable. He let out a pitiful scream and ran to hide behind his mother. What's going on? My head throbbed with frustration. Forget it. Just fill this out. What's this? My husband asked cautiously, peeking out from behind his mother like a frightened turtle. As he saw the paper in my hand, his face went blank. Divorce papers, I announced. What? My husband and mother-in-law both exclaimed, their jaws dropping. I waved the paper in front of them. I've already filled out my part. I'll submit it to the government office after the New Year's break, so you might want to get moving. That paper is fake. How can you even submit it with the government office closed? Actually, you can obtain divorce papers during holidays, and they're even available online. If I choose, I can submit them today, and they will be accepted. As I thrust the papers towards him, he shook his head, tears welling up. No, I don't want this. I don't want a divorce. You don't want me to leave, huh? No. You prefer having me around to handle everything for you? Yes. Oh no, that's not what I meant. See? No. Is this déjà vu? It feels like I heard the same reaction when I raised my voice earlier. Anyway, if you're not going to sign, I'll have to get an expert to handle it. I'm going through with the divorce with or without your signature. I've already informed my parents. Emily. Yes, Mom. Are you ready? Yes, I've packed everything. At my call, my daughter appeared, holding her bag in hand. Hey, are you going somewhere? My husband called out. I glanced back, holding up my own bag. Good question. We're heading back to my parents' house now. You've got to be kidding me. No, I'm not. I wasn't joking. The way you've been treating us, we'll handle this through our lawyer. Goodbye. I had said what needed to be said. With my luggage in hand, I headed toward the front door with Emily. My husband immediately followed. Wait a minute, you can't live without me. At his words, I paused and turned around slowly. He stopped as well, and I fixed him with a steady gaze. Did you forget something? I asked. What do you mean? I used to have a better career than you. I was making more money than you even before I left my job when I got pregnant. Even now, I was earning more than you do. His face went pale. Had he really forgotten? Convenient memory. I know I'm starting from scratch, but I'll gradually get back to work. My parents are supporting me and will be staying at their house for a while. I'll find a job and get back on my feet. Even if I don't earn as much as I did before, I'll make it work. Seeing my determination, my husband was already on the verge of tears. I'm sorry. I can change. Please don't divorce me, he pleaded. You had plenty of chances to change, but you threw them all away. It's too late for regrets. With that, I placed my hand on the front door. Just as I was about to leave, my mother-in-law, who had been silent until now, spoke up. Wait, she called out, her face showing concern. What about my meals? I don't care, I snapped, and with that, my daughter and I walked out of my in-laws' house. We headed straight to my parents' home, where they greeted us warmly. Well, what a rough start to the new year, my mother said, urging us to warm up by the heater. My daughter, relieved, began peeling tangerines. We sat by the heater, enjoying the tangerines. Despite the chaos of the day, it felt comforting to be in a more peaceful setting. I hoped for a more relaxing new year next time and promised myself that I would visit the shrine tomorrow to make that wish. In the following days, my ex-husband kept insisting he didn't want a divorce. Although the negotiations were tough, we eventually reached an agreement, especially considering our daughter's refusal to stay with him. The child support was settled in one lump sum. I couldn't trust him to make regular payments. As a result, the apartment we shared was sold, and Ben moved back in with his parents. My mother hasn't been much help. If anything, she's gotten worse. One day, my ex-husband called, complaining that a neighbor had seen me working like a servant and that news of our divorce had spread quickly through the local gossip network. As a result, my ex-mother-in-law was facing scorn from the neighbors. Of course she was, no matter how rural the area, treating a wife like a servant is unacceptable. Since then, my ex-mother-in-law had become extremely volatile, using her son as if he were a servant. Their arguments were escalating, and he was venting his frustrations to me over the phone. I had no interest in their drama and was prepared to hang up after confirming that I'd received the child support payment. "You got what you deserved," I said coldly, picturing my ex-husband on the verge of tears on the other end. "Please, can't you help me a little? I'm Emily's father, and my mother is her grandmother." I smiled at his plea, though he couldn't see it, and replied, "I've had a drink." "Why are you talking like that?" "I'm drunk." "Hey, I can't go. I'm sorry. "Why should I help you?" I shouted before hanging up and blocking his number. Fortune favors those who laugh. For a while afterward, I couldn't stop laughing.